Europe must cure the cancer, not just kill the pain. Finnish Foreign Minister Elina Valtonen said, warning that Russia will remain a long-term strategic threat far beyond Ukraine. She spoke in Copenhagen, where EU foreign ministers met to discuss Russia's war and the crisis in Gaza. Ministers urged stronger military and economic pressure on Moscow after this week's deadly strike on Kyiv and Zaporizhia, and they pressed for urgent steps to seize frozen Russian assets. At the same time, several countries demanded tougher action against Israel, citing famine and mounting civilian deaths in Gaza.
What comes to Russia, now the freedom-loving world should concentrate on really curing the cancer instead of just killing the pain, meaning that we should take it for granted and for given that Russia, unfortunately, will be posing a long-term strategic threat. And therefore, it will be a threat not just in Ukraine, also there going forward, but also to the rest of us. So we should really find our forces and put together our forces to put the pressure on Russia to end the killing, where we fully support Donald Trump's agenda on finding a deal on Ukraine. But at the same time, we need to make sure that what has happened in Ukraine will never happen again.
Political statements don't stop Russian missiles. Real action does. That was the message from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy after another massive attack on Ukraine. In Zaporizhia, a Russian strike on a residential building killed one person and injured dozens, including children. Explosions were reported in many regions as Moscow launched almost 540 drones, 8 ballistic missiles and 37 other rockets in a single night. Zelensky said Russia used the time allocated for preparing a possible meeting with dictator Putin to prepare new strikes instead. He warned the war would not end with empty words. Private armies instead of US troops, Trump's new idea for Ukraine. President Donald Trump is in talks with European allies about bringing American private military contractors into Ukraine, The Telegraph reports. The plan would see them build fortifications, run bases, and protect US interests, a move presented as a deterrent to Russia after Trump ruled out deploying regular US forces. A UK government source said the contractors would effectively act as America's boots in Ukraine, sending a clear signal to the Kremlin that any attack on them could provoke a US response. European officials believe the idea could strengthen deterrence against Moscow while easing domestic opposition in the US to foreign deployments. The proposal is being discussed as part of a broader talks on security guarantees for Ukraine, with Britain and France taking a leading role. Estonia and Lithuania are demanding that European Union move quickly to seize more than 200 billion euros in frozen Russian assets and direct the funds to Ukraine. Foreign Minister of Estonia, Margus Tsahkna, said that there is no reason to delay. The call comes as EU Foreign Minister meet in Copenhagen to discuss further measures against Moscow following Russia's latest mass strikes on Ukrainian cities. Tallinn argues that there are no legal barriers to confiscation, only a lack of political consensus. Most of the frozen money is held in Belgium, where the government has voiced concern about possible financial and legal risks if it acts alone. Estonia says those risks should be managed collectively with a coalition of EU states taking responsibility. The debate over frozen assets has been ongoing for months. While Baltic states and several Eastern European countries want immediate action, larger Western members, including Germany, Italy and Belgium, remain cautious. Still, momentum is building. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said earlier this week the funds must eventually go to Ukraine's defense and reconstruction, while EU foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas underlined that assets cannot be returned to Russia without reparations. Estonia insists the time for hesitation has passed, warning that Russia is desperate for cash to fund its war and that the aggressor must pay for the damage it has caused. Washington gives Ukraine weapons to strike deep inside Russia. The United States is now providing Ukraine with weapons capable of hitting distance targets inside Russian territory, according to U.S. Ambassador to NATO Matthew Whitaker. Speaking to Fox News, Whitaker said the move is part of President Donald Trump's new strategy on the war, which differs from Joe Biden's approach in 3 ways. Funding. American weapons for Ukraine are no longer paid for by U.S. taxpayers. Diplomacy. Washington is directly negotiating with Moscow, something the previous administration did not pursue. Weapons. Ukraine has given the ability to strike deeper into Russia. Whitaker also argued that Trump has created conditions that forced Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table, pointing to prisoner exchanges and as a sign of a progress. Ukrainian forces strike 2 Russian oil refineries. It was an overnight drone strikes. First is the Krasnodar refinery, which produces around 3 million tons of petrol, diesel, and aviation fuel annually, is involved in supplying the Russian armed forces. Ukrainian officials said multiple explosions and a large fire were recorded at the site. And in Russia's Samara region, Ukrainian drone units struck the refinery for a second time this month. The plant processes up to 8.5 million tons of crude oil per year, producing petrol, diesel, jet fuel, and bitumen. A fire was reported in the area, and Ukrainian authorities said the scale of the damage is still being assessed. U.S. billionaire eyes Ukraine's largest lithium deposit. U.S. billionaire Ronald Lauder has shown interest in developing Ukraine's biggest lithium deposit. Economy Minister Oleksiy Sobolev confirmed. Lauder's backing comes through the TechMed, a company where Lauder is an investor and which is expected to take part in the newly announced tender for the Dobra deposit in the Kirovohrad region. TechMed's representatives have already expressed strong interest in the project. Sobolev explained that the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation is a key partner in the U.S.-Ukraine Minerals Agreement and is the largest shareholder in TechMed. Andriy Yermak, head of Ukraine's presidential office, stressed that the project is essential to Lauder personally and that he's taken to invest in Ukraine. That's all for now. For more content about Ukraine, please subscribe.